Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Education Exchange, your most popular and successful program on public TV and on Channel 4, City Channel. And tonight we are having the pleasure of hosting a group of teachers from Southeast Junior High in Iowa City, and with them a special student, Addison Prantner, who is actually our camera person tonight. So she's not going to be on the air with her teachers, but she's doing maybe a bigger job than what you are going to do tonight. So welcome all of you to the set at Public Access TV. We are on Public Access TV on Channel 4, City Channel, as well as on YouTube instantly. This program has been built nearly 29 years ago by John Kerhoff, the young man behind the glass door there. And I think he was your teacher.
Yes, he was. Yep.
And Mike Peterson, who is the other camera person and floor director tonight. So let us start. We are introducing a program called CASL program.
That's right.
And that's you are pioneer in this experiment. I'm asking Scott now.
Yeah. So this is the second year we've offered this program. What we wanted to do is combine language arts, global studies, and science into one block of time. So we've got 90 students that are a part of each cohort right now. And we've split them into three groups where 30 will be with me in my room, and 30 will be with Mike and Michele.
And you are the science teacher.
Right.
And Mike is a language art. Yep. Karla is another science teacher, and Michele is a global studies teacher, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so when I have my students in my class for first period, when the bell rings, they will all 30 go to global studies together, or language arts, and then third period they'll go to the other one, global studies, yeah. Yes. Language arts, global studies, science. And what that does is, with those students staying together, we can create lessons that aren't constrained to just 45 minutes. So if we want to have kids do a lesson that extends that whole period where they're working on a project that's cross-curricular, they don't have to transition. They don't have to go from room to room. Or if we want to divide them up and do one like science-focused lesson for all day, we can do that. Or just two of the three. So we have a lot of flexibility with what we've kind of created.
Mike, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the name that we chose for the program, CASL, and it's a little bit of a confusing acronym if you just look at the spelling, but I mean, what Scott's speaking to is really the cross-curricular aspect of things, of trying to get students to see, much in the way that life isn't separated out into these different academic areas, that school isn't necessarily as clean and clear-cut as we make it out to be at first. So seeing all the connections between what they're doing in science and what they're doing in global studies and then what they're doing in language arts, and really getting them to use all of the different skills that they're kind of building on in each class together to create projects and to really get all of those learning connections as sort of fully fleshed out as they can be.
Karla?
It's exactly, this is my first year starting with the CASL program, and coming into it, I couldn't imagine what it was going to be like, what it was going to look like, but coming in, I am still learning and still understanding how this all fits together, but it is a way better approach than just 45 minutes. Yeah, separating everything, in which I had a student recently say, I was mentioning something about language arts, and then they say, why are we learning that here? This is science. And I said, because it all goes together. You don't just apply one of them at a time. They all just combine together. And it's been great so far. It's been really great.
Sure.
Yeah, I think in addition to the cross-curricular approach, we want to give students a lot of voice in what they do, a lot of say in what they learn about. And I think a lot of the skills that we're trying to work with them on go beyond curricular areas anyway. They're more transfer skills that they're going to need in life with collaboration, communication, problem solving, those types of skills. Learning how to research and find good information and determine credibility of information that they're looking for. And those skills, those aren't a science skill, they're not a language arts skill, they're not a global studies skill, they're a life skill that they need. And so that's another thing I think we're trying to do is help them make those connections as well.
And you have prepared some slides for us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can take a look at those
So
now.
let us go ahead and start looking at that and
Sure.
explain to our viewers what they are looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so one of the first slides we're going to look at here is really kind of going back to our original journey. So if we take a look at the next one, we'll talk about kind of why we're doing this and what really led us to decide that CASL was an approach we wanted to try. And so really, before I dive into any of these sort of main points, the big thing that that led us to this was just a group of teachers at a professional development meeting who had this time and were trying to work together across different curricular areas, and we just tried to think about, well, what are some different ways we can think of doing things, and how can we get students to see all these connections that we see between the different things that we're doing. So that's what really led us to this, and then we tried to think about what can we do to meet the needs of all of the different students at Southeast, and it's a really large and diverse student body, and there's really been an emphasis at the school about making the learning that we're doing engaging and interesting for students, really representing, like we said earlier, real life problems and making things feel more authentic. I'm always in favor of allowing teachers more flexibility in the way that they handle things, and that's, I think, been one of the real strong points of CASL. And then finally, I think Michele was speaking to this point earlier when we're really focused on those life skills of students, of the communication and collaboration, and then some added benefits of building kind of a sense of community among them. So those are really some of the big driving forces that led to it. And then I think if we take a look at the next slide, you'll see a building goal that kind of goes along with those.
So this kind of comes from of us as a whole school working together on this. So we want to increase the students that report school values diversity and respects differences. And so there's a couple different things that are on there focusing on PBIS, MTSS. So those are kind of some structural things and programs that we have going. But then we really think that we fit in with that engagement strategies and trying to make learning and class feel a little bit, I would say a little bit different. So we really focus on getting kids working together and problem solving together and trying to be creative with our instructional tools that we use. So hopefully kids feel more connected and engaged in what they're doing.
And to add to that, to go along with engagement strategies, I think a lot of teachers at Southeast have tried to get more involved with the idea of a blended learning approach to things and maybe on a path to a more personalized learning where students can have more of a say in what they're learning about, what they're researching about. And so I think the CASL program allowed us just another avenue to use in regards to more of a path to personalized learning. Because there's a little bit more flexibility in the structure, I think it allows maybe a little more flexibility for students as well.
Before we move to the next slide, I have a question about, it looks from what you just told us now that this is a project or a program that really you took the responsibility as teacher to initiate and maintain. And this is a huge endeavor because usually people go to school and they are given the curriculum and it's written, lesson plans are ready. Now you have to start from scratch, right? this is very challenging. Can you address this, Karla, before we move to the next slide?
I think that I'm the perfect person to address this coming in for the first year,
Right.
in which I didn't know. I tried Googling CASL to see if I could find anything to give me some more insight, and there wasn't anything. So when the school year began, we got to planning, and I realized that it was them that created everything, and I was jumping in, trying to add my own outsider's perspective to maybe make it more understandable for the students as well as myself. And it's a great team, and if you want something like this, you have to be willing to work together, be flexible, hear each other out, and that's essentially what we're trying to get our students to do as well. So it's perfect practice and modeling of that approach as well.
Michele, I think you selected the hard, you took the hard way in teaching there. I mean, you could have just stay where you are in your safe comfort zone and not worry about anything else, because I can imagine, I had some work in alternative education before, and we were doing this a lot, because our kids were not ready for the regular conventional separation of subject matter.
Right.
So we joined, and it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I think to begin with, it was a little daunting to start because really the sky was the limit, but you had to kind of pace yourself to decide, well, what can we get done in this time to have ready, and so I think, but as we've worked on it more and more, we've been able to add new things this year. We've been able to modify things that maybe we did last year that, as Karla said, we found out the way we were trying to address it maybe wasn't as clear to the students. And that was one great thing about adding, Karla to our team. Karla, as someone new coming in to see what we were doing, could stop us and say, I need you to explain this better. And it really made us explain better. You're right. The students, this is the first time they're hearing some of what we're doing. And we need to be more clear. And so we've been able to kind of modify this year as we've, saw things that worked well, things that didn't work well. But certainly it's an ever-evolving thing. It's really never done. Even when we have something and we have an idea, it requires a lot of even changes for the next year, because the whole idea is to try to personalize it more for our students, and our students will be different every year.
Thank you for this clarification. Shall we move to the next slide?
Yeah.
now?
Sure, yeah.
Sure. The next slide is student enrollment, and students have an option to register for the program after they've been given some information by their guidance counselors and administration. Last year was the first year that we got this started. They got this started, and then I came in the later year. 2017 and 18, that was the first year. They had 90 students, 90 7th graders, 3 cohorts of 30 students each, which they rotated. In the year 2018 and 19, that's when I came in, and we doubled the student population for the CASL program to 180 7th graders. And the same 90 that started moved on to the 8th grade CASL program. And Stimmel teaches the morning classes as far as science, and then I come in during the PM and teach science for CASL as well.
Yeah, and speaking to that, I think you can see like doubling in size, adding an 8th grade portion. It seems like the response has been really positive. And I know even those 90 8th graders, there's a whole nother team of 8th grade teachers that sort of took on almost the same challenge that we did in trying to rethink how are their areas going to work together to really create a similar experience, but do it kind of their own way and make it work for that particular team.
Okay. And if we want to move to the next slide, we can talk a little bit, we'll kind of talk about what is the same and what is different. But some things that are a little bit different with CASL than in the traditional setting. We have a little bit longer, more flexible block of time. It spans 3 class periods, which ends up being about 135 minutes. This kind of allows us to decide how we want to divide up the time. As Scott said, there might be some days where they go from class to class. There will be other days where they maybe stay in one room, depending on what we're doing. It also allowed us to make more community connections. One of the things we wanted to do was to work on trying to get the kids out of the classroom and into the community, but then also bring community members into us to speak. And so by doing this, it allowed us to have a bigger block of time when we wanted to do some of those types of things. It also, the other thing that's different is that we will focus on more cross-curricular projects. When we do a project, and we'll show an example in just a minute, but when we do a project, we want students to be able to meet standards in all 3 subject areas, where normally when a student does a project, they will do that just for global studies or just for language arts. And then we try to give students some choice in how they demonstrate their understanding. So not necessarily always just an essay or just a SMORE or something like that, but lots of different options of what they can do. And then the other thing that's a little different is that we have shared teachers. The students are going to, share the same teachers for that entire block. There's 2 really nice things about it. Number one, we can communicate and collaborate about instruction and programming and the curriculum, but also we can collaborate and communicate about our students. And when we see students struggling, we tend to notice that a little bit quicker because there are 3 of us communicating about that when we have some student needs.
Let's go to the next now.
Yeah. So we don't want to really give off the impression that it's completely different. It is just sort of another approach. There's still a lot of similarities to the way that other teachers are doing things at Southeast. It's all the same standards. And so one big point that we want to make is it's not a remedial program. It's not for gifted students. It really is just another way of getting students to see content and getting them to make connections. They continue to receive separate grades in each of their different courses. It's similar class sizes and teacher-student ratios. The learning objectives, I think we kind of spoke to this earlier. Although we're kind of doing a project and then students are meeting learning objectives for each content areas, we're still really aiming for the same learning objectives that other teachers across the district and the building are. And then I think it's also important to remember we're following a traditional schedule, and then we do shuffle students around just at the trimester mark, so they're not necessarily with one group of 30 all year long. They get kind of shuffled along from there. But those are kind of the main similarities, and then I think Michele was going to talk about the
If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about,
just some pictures.
Some pictures.
Got some examples of our team building and getting out of the classroom.
So if we shuffle through these next few slides, you can see some examples of some team building, some more cross-curricular projects that we've been involved in, some of the collaboration we've done. One of those is from art and the other one with our media specialist. Some things we're trying to do to get students more actively engaged. And there's from last year's field trip to Pear Deck, along with some speakers we had come in from Merge to talk to the kids. As far as how we kind of get things started at the beginning of the year, our Unit 1 is learning how to learn. And so there are 3 major goal areas that we have for students. Number 1, we want them to start working on having more of a growth mindset to learning instead of a fixed mindset. We're going to be asking them to do a lot of new things, and we want them to be open to trying new things. And that's kind of where the growth mindset comes in. A second one is goal setting, having goals for themselves as a learner. And then that third one that was on there, we just talked about learner profiles. And the students do these where they just try to get to know themselves as a learner better. What kind of environment do they learn in best? What are some things they've been struggling with? And some things, what do they want to learn? What do they want to do as the year goes on? Okay. So going to the next slide then,
This is just an example of our first like major cross-curricular project that we had the students complete. It was on resources and resource scarcity. So what kind of made this different about than any other project that we've done before or the students have done before is they had to create an authentic piece of evidence that showed that they understood the learning targets. So I picked 2 learning targets for science, they had 2 for language arts, 2 for global studies, and they had to create something that showed that they understood that learning target. So as a science teacher, evidence is incredibly important, and being able to prove your claim is correct with a piece of evidence. So it was tough for kids to think that way because for years and years they've been told, like, here's your assignment, you need to write this in this blank, and that shows you did the correct thing. But they had to create the blank themselves that showed that they get it. So it took a little while to get them to get the project scaffolded so that they could do that. But
so if we go to the next slide, some of the takeaways from that project.
The first project, something that I realized was that the students sometimes were going to be successful at different levels. Some of them, since this was the first project, were successful, but seeing as this was a very different way for them to think, their work was very different levels from other students. We had to scaffold and also model to the students so they would get a better understanding of how to complete this, and there is some time in which they choose what they want to work on and how they want to work on, and they take some independence in their learning that way.
Yeah, and if we take a look at the next slide, just some of the big takeaways now that we're kind of a year and a half into this process. In comparison to the other classes that I've taught, students really, really know each other. It forms kind of a strong community bond among students. Specifically their writing, as their language arts teacher, I've noticed a lot of improvement in that. And research, because they're connecting things through content areas, that's a real skill area that's improved. And then because we're able to collaborate about students and what their needs are, really I think it's helped with any sort of issues with behavior or any sort of issues with trying to increase social behavior in class too. So that's been a really big takeaway.
if you go to the next slide, here's just some feedback from students. We've given our kids surveys on kind of some feedback for us. You know, like what do they like about it? What do they wish is different?
Which is very important. They are the consumers.
Right, and that kind of brings us back to the goal from the beginning. You know, if they don't think what we're doing is enjoyable or engaging, they're not going to feel valued and connected to their school. So this feedback was important for us as we kind of planned our year.
If we want to go to the next slide.
Some of the opportunities that this presents is it does definitely create a stronger community within the students. Working with teachers, it's at a completely different level, and the flexibility for teachers to be able to approach these different projects is definitely a positive. Some challenges are how to manage all this, really, so that the ending product is something that you originally had in mind, as far as timing and scheduling and things like that.
Great.
Yeah, and especially the administration team and the guidance team, really just organizing the logistics of how students will have these classes at these times is really, they've put in a lot of effort on our behalf, so we're pretty thankful for that.
Is there anything you want to add to our viewers who are watching us now?
Well, you mentioned like it's a lot of work at the earlier, and it was a lot of work. We said last year that we felt like first-year teachers all over again, and I think we said a bunch of times we felt like we were flying the plane as we were building it. But it was all really meaningful work, and we felt empowered because we were given the flexibility and the trust from our administrators to do what's best for kids. And create something that we believed in. So it was totally teacher-driven from the beginning, and it was a lot of work, but
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a
It's
lot of
been
fun.
very
Kids
rewarding
are
and
so
it's been a lot of
happy.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
The last day of school, yeah.
They're always happy on the last day of
Right,
school.
yeah.
And you are doing great work, and you really deserve big credit from us, from the community, and from our viewers. And of course, if parents need any information, they can contact you there.
Yeah, or they want to come in and
Karla,
be a
or
guest speaker.
Michele.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And we thank Public Access TV for the chance.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, thank you.
Channel
Okay.
4, that's the city channel, as well as YouTube, which is going to be airing this program tonight.
And
Thank
our-
you
our
very
camera
much.
person too.
Of
Right,
course,
yeah.
the camera. She is the whole show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We thank John Kerhoff, Michael Peterson, Dr. Geronimo Sandoval, who is the director of Public Access TV, for the great effort. And thank you, and we will be waiting to see you again on this set
Thanks.
sometime
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, mics are off.
All right.
Wow, that's, how did you do this on the slides like that? That was like whipping you.
Well, like I said, we've done a couple presentations before,
Yeah.
so we.
She got us. Addison got us. Well, over and out.
Yep.
Another successful run. We found out the mute buttons don't work.
They're sticky sometimes.
It's not secret. They all lit up like they said word. They're like, yeah, muted. Apparently they have to
anything bad.